writer Chris Smith, he writes for Forbes, did a really interesting piece about the earnings of WWE Superstars. And John Cena, who's also involved with movies, television, a whole bunch of things, is now number one on the list, earned about $10 million last year. Chris, what inspired you to write this piece, and what did you learn, if anything, from doing this?
As far as inspiration, this is something that I'd always wanted to do since starting at Forbes, 6 years ago. And so I spent a few years gathering documents, doing research and reporting, and then 2 years ago we published our first ever list of WWE's highest earners. So this is the third edition of it, and it's now become a bit of an annual franchise for us. And I guess, what I've learned in doing it is that WWE is really a story of tremendous opportunity for wrestlers to make, a great deal of money, as this list shows, but that it's really only available to those really top select few superstars, the John Cena's, Brock Lesnar's, Roman Reigns's of the world, who really top the charts, and that, the vast majority of these guys, kind of aren't making that kind of money.
Yeah, that's the thing with this, because you see the top ones, and those are the ones that others will list in other places when they look at your story. But when you look at all the superstars on the list, not everybody is making that kind of money. So when you're putting a list like that together, and you mentioned it, is it surprising that the disparity between the numbers?
I think it might be more drastic of a gap than many people anticipate, though I don't know if I would call it, a surprise. Someone like John Cena is obviously something of a crossover celebrity at this point. Similar thing with Brock Lesnar having his career in the UFC. But it's absolutely true where, only 5 wrestlers are making over $3 million a year. And in some cases, that's including money coming from outside of WWE. It really shows that, how wide of a gap there is between, your really top earners and the rest of the field.
What kind of research did this entail?
It's really a lot, and it's kind of all over the board. As I mentioned before, this is something I'd wanted to do for a long time, and so for years it was a matter of collecting lawsuits, because there's been a lot of lawsuits against WWE that have included in them old wrestler contracts, have included other, kind of private documents, so pay-per-view, payout documents, tax returns for wrestlers, and it's been a matter of, collecting a lot of that information and using that to kind of build up a knowledge base that I've then been able to go out, use WWE's public financial filings, and find information in there that's usable, interview wrestlers and former company executives, and it's basically just trying to gather as much info as we can, because unlike a lot of other areas, WWE pay information is very, very secretive. Basically, very few people know kind of the details of an individual wrestler's contract. And even if you have, John Cena's contract and all of WWE's financial filings, you can't really pinpoint exactly what he makes because it's on such, an event-to-an-event basis. So it's essentially gathering, as much information as is out there, and then using kind of those historical documents as a guide to nail down our estimates.
How accurate do you feel are the numbers? And that's no disrespect to what you're doing, because obviously you feel accurate because you wrote it and you posted it out there. The story is there. But is there we're 95% pretty sure this is exactly what they're making? Or just how comfortable, how accurate do you think the numbers are?
That's an excellent question, and a totally fair one. I feel very comfortable that, even if we're not exactly, not only are we in the ballpark, but I think we're kind of in the right row. So even if we're not sitting in the right seat, I think we are really close. Reason for that is I have spoken to a few people who've known, kind of specific numbers both before and after the fact, and I know that our estimates were close in those situations. I know, for a fact, so for instance, Triple H kind of doubles as a company executive and as a in-ring wrestler. And so through WWE's proxy filings, we know exactly how much money he makes from performing as a wrestler and from his merchandise, and so that acts as a see, just how close we are. And so I think, kind of all those taken together, and as you mentioned, we wouldn't be publishing it if we weren't pretty confident in it. And it took me, probably 3-4 years of work before I was confident enough to publish that first list a few years ago. So I'd say that, we're pretty confident. So even if, you could probably, maybe a little bit of wiggle room on the decimal points, but I'd say we're just about there.
Any reaction from WWE and its superstars, past or present?
Nothing publicly. I've reached out to WWE in the past. They're usually, very friendly and happy to talk, but, aren't forthcoming on any of the details. And I don't think they've ever commented on it in the past. And I've spoken with some wrestlers and executives, unfortunately not on the record, so can't really share too much about, who they are and what they said. But no one's ever expressed to me that we're way off or have had anything wrong in the past, which helps my level of confidence in doing this.
It is a publicly traded company, like you mentioned, and you mentioned that you're able to get some records that way. Why do you think WWE or any company wouldn't want to release its numbers or make it known what their superstars are earning?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's a few different levels to that. On one hand, it's a simple, the same reason that many private companies in this country, don't publish what everyone's getting paid, because then it makes it more difficult for, other wrestlers to negotiate. By kind of keeping wrestlers in the dark about what their coworkers are making, they lose a little bit of leverage in the negotiating room. So I think, that's just a basic part of it. Another is that there's been a lot of talk about should wrestlers unionize, should they be considered full-time employees, because as of now they're independent contractors, and so they don't get benefit, and a lot of people feel that's an unfair situation, since a lot of these wrestlers are working 150, 160 events a year. It's essentially a full-time job. And so I think that WWE wants there to be as little info out there as possible, on how much these wrestlers are making. Because as we were talking about before, the vast majority are on, pretty low end of the spectrum. So, WWE has said in the past the average wrestler makes about $500,000 a year altogether. But when you consider that, the top few guys are making millions of dollars, it gives you an idea of, how much lower the bottom end of the spectrum gets.